Wired Human Fights to Protect Children from Digital Harm. Yes, we must discuss this 24/7, 365, because childhood is not for sale. Jason Frost joins us today. He is coming from places unknown. Well, he'll discuss that if he wants, to discuss Wired Human's core mission of safeguarding children's innocence. He is the co founder and CEO of Wired Human, a nonprofit created to help and empower children and families and help them navigate the digital world and to support youth as advocates for online safety. The most important, Jason. The website is wiredhuman.org. Welcome, welcome, Jason Frost to the Warriors.
Wow, it is an honor, Lynn, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for tracking me down and giving me this privileged opportunity. I'm excited to be here for your guests and be a part of this community.
Well, thank you, because I'm so excited. I can almost not get the words out. I mean that, Jason, because, our hashtag at the Warriors is community creates change. So when I see somebody who's really boots on the ground, dealing with our youth, especially, our future adults, our future leaders, I want to speak to that person. Let me ask you something. Let's jump right in, because you say educate, equip, empower. These are the words of Wired Human. But before we start, what would you like to share with us? A little bit about Jason Frost. Anything where you grew up? Any kind of little thing about you that you might want to spill here, as we say on the Warriors?
Oh, yeah. What comes to mind, actually, and I love it, the spontaneous question. The first thing that jumped to mind is my childhood. I got to be a boy a really long time. So my parents, my dad worked always in big major cities in Chicago and Washington, D.C., but we always lived in the sticks. And so I grew up catching fish, frogs, camping out in the backyard, learning to keep a fire going for a week straight and all this stuff. And just really got the experience of what it feels like to be screen-free childhood, but then also get the experience of when I got my first smartphone at 25 years old. And shortly after, I needed glasses because my eyes got weaker. I had all these other things that I just noticed, like I just felt like I was just downgrading myself, but also living in a world where it's really hard to live without that technology. So yes, so if that's something that describes maybe somebody who knows what it feels like to breathe air, but also is somebody who also learned what it feels like to be at the bottom of the ocean at the same time with technology.
Jason, I love that so much. It is something we have to remind people about, right? That you were very lucky to experience that. I kind of say, and jump in if you disagree or agree, I kind of think 30 and under, my kids are all in their 30s, right? So they just kind of missed growing up totally in that kind of digital bubble type thing. But it's not kids' faults today. It's not parents or caregivers' faults. This is the way of the world. And what I love about Wired Human, so how are we going to work and live within that world? That's what we're going to do, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And it's not going anywhere. It's only going to get more extreme. And so we just have to have we really have to be careful not to have a victim mentality. We really need to rise up. I love warriors because that's what I really feel this is about. It's recognizing that we are in a war, in a battle, but this time it's very unseen. And so we feel the symptoms of it. We feel the shame of it. We feel as parents, the overwhelmed feelings of it, feeling like we're failing our way through the process. But I think if people probably came to you and all the people you've interviewed, I could imagine, Lynn, you would tell them that we're all in the same boat together, that everybody, as isolating as it feels, we're actually all experiencing very similar stories, that this technology, social media, doesn't discriminate and it goes after everybody.
It goes after everybody. And also, that reminds me, Jason, first of all, these issues of technology and online and child safety, family safety, because I like to say it's a partnership, it's the whole family involved. Also, everybody can jump on board. These are bipartisan issues. It
Yes.
doesn't belong to any political party, not right, not left. This is strictly and truly bipartisan. And I know you're doing a lot of great work, around the country with so many great people in this space, as we do as the war, with the Warriors. And I'm just thrilled with that, because this really is the one issue we can all truly come together about, and sometimes even share a cup of coffee. So I like that totally. Now let's get into, tell us about the origins of Wired Human. What happened? What was the spark? All of a sudden you woke up one day, because this is what happened with me with the Warriors, and I said, I'm going to become a warrior. Did you wake up and say, I'm going to form Wired Human? How did that all start?
It's a long journey. It's the 10,000 hours. The origin of that, it came from working in education. So my wife's a teacher by profession, and I worked in education with kids with disabilities and behavioral disorders, in more of a social worker's role. And we spent about 4 or 5 years doing that together. And that's the only thing we ever talked about was school and dynamics. But what was also revealed was back in, I would say in 2017 or 16 and 17, I was just shocked that every middle schooler that was in a cohort of kids, one day we asked who here has a smartphone, and every single person raised their hand except one, and he happened to have a tablet. And they weren't just your everyday smartphone. It was like your Samsung S6 or 5 back in the day, like flagship $450 smartphone. And just in your average family, that we're giving these to these kids. And the side effects that we were seeing of this was violence, human trafficking, suicidal ideation, nudes going viral, like everything you could imagine, eating disorders, that could, or bullying was, off the charts. So like these things were just becoming everyday life, but the systems around us, like the education system, the policies, were not changing or addressing any of those needs. And we could see sort of where the hockey puck was going to land at that point, and recognize this is only going to get 10 times worse, but the system is going to change so slowly unless somebody really gives it a push, that the kids are going to pay the ultimate price for this. And unfortunately, despite our best efforts and many other experts and crusaders in this field fighting for child online safety and healthy families, it has gotten way worse. And the symptoms is now a mental health crisis that has exploded across not just the US, but on a global scale. So that led to us going back then to really saying we're either not going to talk about this anymore, because that's pretty much all we started talking about was social media stories and smartphone stories and all these things that were happening in school. We would numb ourselves and just let it go because we need to somehow exist as normal people, or we were going to devote our lives to this, go back to school. I did my master's degree. So this is what we did. I did my master's in human rights and children's rights law, and focused specifically on how online the sexualization of the internet and kids was considered a human rights violation through pornography. My wife started working on her PhD on a similar issue, and we just went full bore into this theme, which eventually led to a whole compilation of years of research and studies that we turned into a book called The Glass Between Us. And we really focused in on just telling stories. We told the stories of youth, and every single story and almost every other sentence has a footnote next to it where you can go back up that information with peer-reviewed research or news articles or things that are reputable, other books that will tell you that this is happening not just in this scenario, but it's happening across the US, it's happening across the world. And that gathered a whole community around us of experts, that we kind of came to this crossroads. What are we gonna do now? Like, we have the book, we have the research, we're seeing this impact. And we decided to start the nonprofit Wired Human with a unique focus that we're going to be in the background for the most part, and we're going to make kids and youth and college students the center of all the discussions and elevate their voices, their testimonies, their experiences before decision makers in our local communities in DC, to be able to tell the truth about what's happening. And that vision, coming now almost 4 years later, has led youth into the White House multiple times, meeting with the administration and task forces on this issue, telling the truth to the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, about what's happening online, being able to have the opportunity to do press conferences with Senator Blackburn and Senator Blumenthal, going on national news on both sides of the political aisle in front of over 2 million people in audience. These youth are out there courageously putting everything on the line. As a youth, to go in front of 2 million people when you're putting in your college applications takes a lot of courage, to know that this is what you want to do and you're willing to take the risk. And so I really tip my hat to the youth that we've been involved with, and also to the youth of our nation in the US, of their potential to rise up as leaders and see real change happen. And I'll just give one example of that change is when we met with the Surgeon General, we shared the testimonies of youth. We had prepared testimonies of hundreds of youth experiencing suicidal ideation, or even seeing family members who have lost their lives to suicide, eating disorders, everything you could imagine. And we compiled those testimonies and presented it to the Surgeon General. And he later mentioned Wired Human in a New York Times article, sharing his experience and saying that he would like to see warning labels being placed on social media similar to what we've seen on cigarettes. Now, we can't take full credit for that. I'm sure there's a lot of other great people working that he had interacted with and spoken to, and the Surgeon General has always been proactive for child online safety. But it shows how youth actually can make change if their voices are elevated. So that's Wired Human. That is the most simplistic mission that we have, is to educate youth, get them up and running, get them in a leadership role, and let them tell the truth and experiences that we believe is going to push for change.
Now, Jason, you said a lot. You are music to my ears. First of all, I'm going to keep thanking you and your beautiful wife, Lisa, for doing this. You have, no, what you have done in 4 years is such a tremendous amount of advocacy, work, take actions, resources. It's exactly, in my warrior's opinion, what needs to be done. Doing all of this and getting our youth, not just preaching. It's not them and us. It's let them lead the way, give them the tools, help them.
Yes.
I do use the word partnerships because it's not, I used to talk to kids and then I decided, no, the kids have to talk to me. Like they have to tell me what they're experiencing. They have to share, once they open up and start trusting and all that, they want to be heard. They want to create change. They want to do all of this, but we have to give it to them. So again, I can't thank you enough, you and your wife, for doing all of this and making it happen. We have to talk to our kids open and honestly. I mean, age appropriate, but because if they have a phone, that's opening up the world, right? And just letting the world come in, strangers come in. And I
Yes.
always say, we most of us lock our front and back doors. We just don't let strangers in, right? That's an analogy people can understand when I say it to them. Let's talk about some of the issues that you think, because you do such terrific work. What should parents right now? Because there's so many issues. Start telling us about some of the issues parents should be looking at. And I say caregivers as well, because the dynamic. I'm here in New York City, but I do travel the country. The dynamic of the family has changed a lot. We have a lot of grandparents in New York raising kids, aunts and uncles, older siblings. So I like to say caregivers too. It's a family dynamic. What should they be looking at? Our overwhelmed public, because we want to make everything also easy. I like to just hand it to them, sort of. What they should be looking at, or where here's a resource, because everybody's so burdened. So the floor is yours. Start talking.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, first, it's nuanced. And if you're ever finding a book or somebody out there says, here's the 1, 2, 3 steps to solve your problem, you probably should keep going, because it's about relationship. It's about you and your kids. It's about your own journey as a family together. And really defining together as a family, what are your core values? What are you headed for as a family? What do you believe in as a family? And these are, oddly enough, I've heard college professors say they brought up values for the first time in their classroom environment as part of their curriculum, because they said it's the first time anybody in these elite colleges had ever talked to the students in their freshman year about values. And values are like the compass that guide our lives. If I say I have a value to respect women, respect my wife, and then I turn around and go watch pornography, I'm not living out my values, and I'm full of lies, because I'm virtually pointed my life compass in the opposite direction of what I'm claiming I'm about. And so that's a great way for families, first of all, to set the standards, come up with 3 values, whether that's courage, whether that's faith, whether that's respect, like 3 values that you agree are really important as a family, and say, this is our compass, and we're going to align our lives and our decisions around technology around these values. So something really simple that I feel like then you don't need all this stuff out there that's going to, give you the 20 points on how to solve the problem. That right there is already relying on what you already carry as a family, what you carry with your kids and your relationships. And then if you want to find out more, in our book, we talk about something a little bit more specific, but it will kind of get into a simple process of how we walk through that with our kids, which we call the RUM model. It's RUMB. It's a very odd acronym because it's an old navigation acronym from way back in the 16th century. And we felt like it was appropriate because it fit. And it was also about guiding and navigating ships and to stay on course. And relationship is the foundation. So if we're not spending time with our kids, keyword time, and we're not really getting getting that FaceTime and really taking an interest. It really comes down to this: what is important to your child is important to you, and what matters to them matters to you. And if they feel that with you, especially teenagers, you're opening a door to have some productive conversation. The second is understanding. And most of us think, oh, it's about what I know, it's about my knowledge, it's about how I can tell them all the dangers of the online world. Really understanding is, what are the core fundamental needs does your teenager, your child have? And what I would challenge parents, for example, this is just, we're going to go through this quick, but like video games, for example, if your child is addicted to video games, and every time they come home from school and you see them and you say, get off, we got to eat, or you got to do your homework, and they don't do it, a great first step versus, ripping it out of the wall and, throwing it in the trash can, is to value the experience they're getting out of it, because they're using that video game to reach a fundamental need. And oftentimes what I see, it's because they don't feel significant, they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel powerful. And video games offer all those things. The only problem is, the minute the video game is turned off, it's the buffet that they've been feeding themselves all this, and then they're completely empty. So then what you can do as a parent is be like, okay, so talk about how cool the game is, like what's interesting about it. Oh, I see you're level 86. Like, you must be really important. How can we find ways that you can feel significant outside of this world? That when you walk away from an experience in the real world, you carry that with you as real value added to your life. And that's just one micro example. And I think so, if we create that baseline of relationship and that foundation of understanding, where kids feel like, you get me, you understand why I'm using this technology and what I'm getting out of it, then you really create a great open door for mentorship. And that's where we actually do talk about things like values, what's charting the course of your life, because you've earned that role. They feel seen and heard. And then when you've discovered what are our dreams, what are our goals, we say it's like talking about crossing a street, Lynn. If you tell your child all the things that are dangerous about a street, you just give them a bunch of rules to memorize. But if you tell them, or you challenge to have the conversation, why are we crossing the street in the first place? What are we trying to get to on the other side? You give them purpose to navigate it safely, because they're actually trying to get to a higher goal. And so that mentorship is all about finding purpose, all about finding what are the reasons we're headed in this direction. How's technology going to get us there? And the very last thing, and this is kind of a funny one, because it's pretty much where society and families, and where we all start from, including myself, is boundaries. Usually the first temptation is, as a teacher, as a parent, it says, here's the boundaries, here's the rules. If you break them, here's the consequences. But I would say, wait until you've established those three things: relationship, understanding, mentorship, and the values. And then use boundaries as a tool to say, this is going to protect what you've said yes to in life. What is most important to you in life? It's actually a tool for you to get what you want out of life. And so those boundaries you put around phones, saying, you know what, we're not going to have phones in your room at night when you're going to sleep, because it's going to protect what you want with your life by letting you sleep, by not letting you go down into the most dangerous neighborhood, which is alone at home with your phone. And these types of things. So that's the model that we suggest for parents. There's a lot more you can find about on our website and our book and our curriculum that we offer, but that's the bare bones of what we suggest parents could immediately do right now with their kids and have some really great results.
Yeah, and I love, Jason, the title of the book, The Glass Between Us. When I first saw that, I'm like, oh, that's such a good title, The Glass Between Us. And I will have the links to everything in the body of this video, so everybody can, purchase the book. Everybody can go back, study up, because your website is just so full of, your blog. You've got a safety guide. You've got so much information. It's so easy for everybody just to use it, take their time and read it. I'm concerned about a couple of things that we don't talk about. And when I bring it up, Jason, I'm told, don't talk about that because the kids will go and look for it. There, and it's pornography. I think we really have to talk so much more about this. Tell me if it's true. I read different things. Remember, you never know what's exactly right. You get different stats and everything. But I was reading, children between the ages of 9 and 17 have access to 4 different devices. The Chromebooks, everything, the phones and all that. And we know about algorithms, and we know kids can innocently not be even looking for pornography, but it just starts appearing, or their friends show it to them. What are your thoughts about all of this? Because I really think this is a crisis. And I really
Absolutely.
think this is something that the parents, they just shut their eyes. They don't want to talk about it. I actually think it has to just be part of everything. Again, age appropriate, but we have to start very young,
Yeah.
just talking about images that aren't right or come to mom or something. Give me your thoughts on all of this.
First of all, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having the courage to talk about this. This is what churches don't want to talk about. It's what communities don't want to talk about because typically people don't want to rock the boat and they don't want to go there. But this is, if we really care about kids, we have to meet kids where they're at. And just want to take a step back because you said something really key is that it'll find you. It's
Mhm.
not a matter of just locking down the devices and keeping your kids offline. It literally will find your kids. And so you need to give them the tools to be able to handle that. One of the things that I think at a bare baseline that we need to understand social media as, and Gail Dines, Gail Dines from Culture Refrain says this, that the social media is basically the gateway to pornography. And the reason is, and this is something I've come to through our own journey, is if you look through the evolution of the internet, you have internet 1.0, internet 2.0, and nobody wants to talk about internet 3.0. And that sounds a little bit weird, but 1.0 is the read-only internet. That was when universities could share information for the first time. And we saw a huge spike in innovation and escalation of how we were able to advance as a society together, just sharing information. 2.0 is my generation. We can now respond to that information through social media. We could write. It was the read write. 3.0 is what our kids are born into, and that's AI. That is the internet that chooses to interact with your kids. And it's completely taken the autonomy away from the user experience because all of those decisions that are made of what your child sees online happen through a model that's completely designed around maximum profit. And it doesn't care how badly your kids get hurt, how robbed they are of their innocence. In fact, it reflects exactly what it is, how a predator thinks. A predator will take advantage of children in a heinous act because there's a certain thing that they want to get out of that child, and they don't care how badly they destroy and damage that child in the process to get it. And social media is the exact same way. So when we talk about pornography, we're actually talking about a tool that is often implemented for the sole purpose of grabbing attention, or not often, it is implemented for the sole purpose of grabbing attention. So AI reads your data, your entire data footprint, runs it, and Meta puts this on their website, over 10 trillion parameters. That's information they fed their learning system. It takes your data, runs it through 10 trillion parameters, and then comes out with a probability outcome through an algorithmic function that says putting this piece of information in front of your child will maximize their time on a screen, which maximizes our profit, which is equating to billions of dollars in profit just from kids alone in the US. So pornography is actually just the best example of that because AI knows that it is a human hack to gaining attention because it hijacks the biological systems of our children who are curious about sex. It releases intense amounts of dopamine into the body that hijack the prefrontal cortex from making logical processes and decision making, and puts them right into a world of corruption, abuse, and honestly, exploitation. And if we don't talk to our kids about that, AI is ready and waiting like a predator to take advantage of them without them ever making the decision themselves.
So you're suggesting, Jason, because people are scared of this, right? And rightfully so. They need to establish those relationships with the kids and get it going and start talking about it.
Yes,
Correct? That's it. Because
absolutely.
when they hear things, they just can't. My biggest fear is people are always shutting their eyes, closing the door because it's too hard for them to understand. And it's basically artificial intelligence. It's here. We got to talk to our kids about it and have some guardrails. I try to, um, I want to. Let's talk a little bit more because there have been some stories in the news about these bots and things like that already, kids being in relationships with them. And it's a couple of things. My mind's jumping around a little bit, so bear with me. Kids will always say to me, and parents are like, why is this all happening? And I said, because you're nothing but a dollar sign to them. And it sounds
Mm,
very crass, but
it's
that's
true.
basically the bottom line. They don't care about you, which you pointed out. They just want you to keep scrolling. Addiction. We have addictions, proven lots of studies about this with the internet and these platforms. And they just see you as money, money, money. And people kind of, oh, now I get it. And the kids are kind of shocked when I tell them. I said, yeah, they
Mhm.
don't care about you. They want money, money, money. They don't care
Yeah.
if you get hurt anything like that. What do you think? What about these bots? What can you share with us? Because when I explain this, they're like, I don't understand. Why do we have bots now? Do people say this to you, or because they can barely, get their minds around any of this? But we have, again, there have been some stories already out there, children who have harmed themselves or harmed family members being, controlled by these bots and things like that. What are you hearing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was recently in a school that banned on their own, just banned smartphones during recess because the straw that broke the camel's back is a student came to one of the teachers and said, "I can't take it anymore. None of us talk to each other anymore. We're all just on our smartphones, and my best friend is a chatbot." And they were like, "Okay, this cannot keep going on. We need." And school, by the way, the most valuable asset that your kids gain from school is not just the education, it's the social relationship connections and problem solving that they have to learn to navigate in these tender years that they hardwire their brains to be fully functioning and successful adults. I'm telling you, if you don't get a perfect math score, you will get by in life if you know how to do relationships well on the
Yes.
other end. It's a million times more important. So we're hijacking the most important part of education, which is social development, when we're allowing our kids to be on smartphones in school and let that be dominating. The other thing about chatbots that I want to say is you need to look at them a little bit differently. If you think of it as a syringe with dopamine inside of it, that's literally what they are. And it's just another way, just like the algorithm suggests content to kids on social media, a chatbot is designed to create a relational bond that does nothing more than just release consistent amount of measured dopamine that is at the control of the user. And so we're seeing that youth are getting addicted to these relationships because one, they're not operating out of a human connection point where we're both growing and sharpening each other and being honest with each other. They're operating out of a premise of how can I get you to enjoy this experience so you keep using it and you keep paying into the subscription or the data collection that you've agreed to. And so it's highly manipulative. And yes, kids have died because chatbots have gone off the rails and have told them to go commit suicide, to come meet them in the afterlife and things like this. So that's another story, but that's also super dangerous. And learning to say no to that now, I think, is more critical than ever. I'll give you one more example. Something I open up with when I'm teaching with kids is my brother, I say, is a rapper. He sent me a song that sounds just incredible. It's actually about the theme of Wired Human, talking about like setting ourselves free from technology. And then after they're all listening and they're bobbing their heads like, I can't believe your brother's a rapper and he sang this, I reveal that he sent it to me after creating a AI generated song that took him less than 5 seconds. He said, turn his website, wiredhuman.org, into a rap song sung by somebody who sounds similar to this. That's all he did. And what it really tells you is the way dopamine delivery systems are going, that you're looking at Spotify, right? Right now it suggests through algorithm suggested songs you should listen to. We're getting to the point where Spotify will just generate completely 100% original music made by AI that's better than what any normal artist could create, because it understands, just like it does on social media, of what's going to produce the most dopamine. But then Adidas, we'll take this one step forward. Adidas just released an all AI generated advertisement with AI people that you can't tell that they're actually AI, but they look like real people. And we're getting the same thing with Netflix. We're realizing AI is going to generate all of our entertainment and films and TV series, but it's going to be 100% original just for you based on your social media analytics that it picks up on. And it will even be able to change the plot. It'll be able to change the story. If it senses that you're getting bored, it'll adjust the story before it gets to the end of the film to give an outcome that will keep you hooked. So these are all realities that it's kind of like, where is the hockey puck going to end up? Not where it is now, but where is it going to get slapped to? We need to head in that direction. And the internet is going to get more intensely designed around being that needle, that syringe with dopamine in it, and being hyper focused on giving the most potent dose of dopamine to our kids, which hijacks them from having any real meaningful experiences in life, sharing culture. And at the end of the day, they're just at that buffet, right? We talked about filling themselves up, getting full, getting fat. but then they take away the device and they're as starving and as empty as they've ever felt. They're lonely, they're lost, they're confused. Every symptom that we're seeing at mass scale in this mental health crisis that's already coming out through the cracks of society. And I think this is what, when you talk about AI chatbots, this is the direction we're headed. And this is why it's so important that we start talking about the realities of what's behind the online world, what its goals are, how manipulative it is, and making sure that we're clear about where we're headed as, as a family, and giving our kids the chance to decide now before it's determined for them later by all of this garbage.
Yeah, Jason, the only, because I rack my brain, constantly about these things, like, where is all this going? Well, it's not going in a good direction,
Yeah.
but but there's a lot of hope out there. Actually, there's a lot of positive things happening, a lot of hope, but it has to stem everything you're saying, with those relationships, starting with the family, get in there
Yes.
with the family, and then letting kids have and develop personal relationships. I mean, you're laying it out so beautifully. This is exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because nobody's talking like this, Jason. What you're doing. I know you were in Washington fairly recently, right? You did
Yeah.
a conference, and could you tell us a little bit about that? What happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. I got nominated to be on Governor Youngkin's Reclaiming Childhood Task Force, which is
Love it.
Executive Order 43 that he delivered this year. Basically, they're investing all their resources, or not all, but a lot of resource and a lot of money into solving a mental health crisis that they see happening across the U.S. And they've identified that they really believe it has a big piece to play with social media correctly, and they're making decisive action to solve that problem within the state of Virginia. It's not that Virginia has a significant problem in comparison to other states or Commonwealth, but they've taken the courage to really stand up against it. I'm telling you, it is for an administration to do this. They're immediately putting themselves at odds with big business and billions of dollars that they're saying, we'll build our AI data farms inside your state if you don't pass legislation, if you don't do this. And it's really refreshing to see that Virginia is saying, no, we're going to choose families first. We're going to choose a future for our kids first. And everything else and all of this garbage that we've talked about is not going to leak into the decision-making process of how our kids are developing. So that was why I was in Virginia. And it was an honor to be there with the First Lady of Virginia, Susanna Youngkin, and her team, and the Secretary of Health and Human Resource, Janet Kelly, really ironing out how can we build a state or a Commonwealth, but a state model that not only works for Virginia, but also can work across the US. So that was a huge honor, and I learned a ton while I was there, and I'm excited to report on it further as it develops.
And that's why I'm saying, Jason, there's a lot of hope, because when we have
Yeah,
something like that, you know, I always believe if somebody is just brave enough to start something, it will snowball. I
yeah,
believe that it'll just take off. When I say a lot of hope also is because we do have more people involved, more groups, more parents, more kids in all of this. Let's talk about some of the legislation. I'm not hearing anything. April 5th, I believe, is the deadline for TikTok. Do you have any words about that? Because I'm not really hearing anything about TikTok.
well, that's it. Yeah, TikTok.
That's an interesting one too.
Yeah, that is interesting. I haven't actually followed that one quite as closely as I've been following the Kids Online Safety Act and some of the things that we've been talking about with Senator Blumenthal, and Senator Blackburn.
Hmm.
So I can't quite weigh into that one quite as much. I know that Trump put the ultimatum on TikTok being able to sell the company. Is that what you're talking about with the deadline that they need to be able to sell to an American?
Well, I am, but let me just give you my little beef, if you don't mind. My
Yes, please.
little problem with TikTok is because in all this talk, bottom line is it's a national security threat. Well, I don't know what everybody is waiting for, but that's for another program. But nothing, Jason, in the conversation was about the harm to children. Now, you could say national security threat also equals a harm to children, right? But
Yeah,
the focus on TikTok was basically we're going to spin it off an American company, not have a Chinese, bite dance. But I keep looking for there was no discussion about child safety in all
yeah,
of this. When I deal with parents whose kids have done here in New York, these horrible TikTok challenges, these,
yeah.
but let's transition into, so we'll keep an eye on what's happening in the next few days with TikTok, because
Well, I
I
could
really
say
want
one.
I want everybody to address, those kind of things, dangerous TikTok challenges. as
Well,
part of the
just to
whole national
say,
security thing, you know?
yeah, well, no, I want to comment on that too, because I know exactly what you're talking about. It is a national security threat. And I just want to make clear that what we're seeing in society, if you ever want to look in any society across the world, you want to see if it's healthy, see how kids are doing. If kids are thriving and doing well and succeeding amazingly and flourishing families are doing well, then you know society is doing something very right, that policy is functioning very well. If kids have a mass health crisis across the board and are suffering, and we have all these problems with suicide and eating disorders and all these things, it's like the thermometer in society that tells you that society has a fever, and kids are the most vulnerable and they're showing those signs. So, and this is when I talk to politicians in DC, I'm like, if you don't care about kids, which I think most of you do, you should care about your jobs and you should care about yourselves. Like, let's appeal to the selfishness of human beings to say that these very things that we're seeing happening in kids is eating and destroying democracy in our country, because you're giving 85-90% of communication today and news articles, like any major news article that we see, is channeled through social media. They use it too. The problem is that we have 5 companies, TikTok being one of them, that's not even a US company, that decides based on their own parameters that are considered, first of all, trade secret and proprietary software. So we don't even know how it functions fully. We just see the outcome, filter and decide how and where and whether any of that information reaches audiences. So do we actually have freedom of speech in the US? I really ask this question, is if everything is decided by essentially 5 people and it has nothing to do with our government process, and it's all arranged and ordered by a system that's completely under the table. We know about the financial incentive, but what if they have a political incentive? What if they decide that they want a certain leader to be elected? They could easily turn the dials of 3.5 billion people across the world and tell AI to sort it out for them and feed them the information to get them to land where we want them to land. So looking at it from a national security perspective, we have to see that we're interlinked with children too. That if children are suffering and are hurting, we know society is unhealthy, our democracy is unhealthy. And so when they debate a lot about the freedom of expression and we're so worried about censorship and all these things, I get that that's a really important theme to cover, but if you're not going one level lower, deeper to that and saying the very structure of how information is disseminated online, and who understand it the best is actually youth, because you ask a 12-year-old girl, why are you putting a bikini photo of yourself up onto social media? Well, because it gets dozens of likes, it ggets passed around constantly, and it goes, they want to be an influencer, and they know that it's called feeding the algorithm. We're giving it what it wants. And of course, 45-year-old men across the world are seeing this too and are activating themselves in a predatory context against that 12-year-old. But if a 12-year-old has something they've learned in school that's really important about basic fundamental freedoms, or something they think they would like to share that they want the world to know, if it's not that bikini photo and it just has something to do with educational, guarantee it'll get absolutely zero traction, because the algorithm isn't interested in something it can't sell. And that's just an example of to see how corrupted this whole thing that we call social media is when it comes to the freedom of expression and democracy. We really are completely out of control. And these companies have way more power and way more autonomy than actually our governments do, is the reality. And a lot of people don't want to accept that reality, but until we do, we're not going to see fundamental changes.
I don't even know where to go with that one, except except I'm agreeing with everything you're saying here, which is so refreshing for me. Here's the thing. What do you think? Okay, 2025. We have proof of so many of these things, the mental health crisis with kids, all people, actually, we've got all of these things happening online. We've got the AI, artificial intelligence. For instance, I know that Wired Human worked very hard on Kids Online Safety Act, the Warriors. We worked on it. Everybody worked on it. Where do you think that stands? Because I was convinced in that lame duck session it was going to get passed
Oh my
last
gosh.
Congress.
Yeah.
There was so much bipartisan support. It was great. And then nothing happened. What do you think is going to happen in 2025? Any predictions for us?
I think so. There's a lot of pieces that need to come into play. So one of the things that I'm excited about, and I'm bipartisan, so this is not a political statement. But I would like to see the Trump administration do play into their strengths. And one of the things they do is they just go and do it. They get it done. But you have to have the ear of the Trump administration to do that. And they're dealing with all these different issues and going after all these different things. But the reason I say this is there was a lot of discouragement because when Donald Trump took office, you had three of the top level AI CEOs immediately on his side.
Yes.
You had Mark Zuckerberg putting very close people in Trump administration's network on his board of directors at Meta, and you could just see that these tech CEOs and these big companies saw the dollar signs and said, if we get comfy cozy with this administration, we can make a good path for ourselves moving forward. I don't believe at all that that represents the values of the administration or represents their policy. And I've also met with people within the White House that are working on policy, and there's some very solid people that care about online safety. And I would say across the board, I don't think if you were going to talk to people in this administration that they would be against it. I think they just need to have the time and space to have an ear pointed at it and realize that they can pull the levers to make this a theme and an issue that needs to happen to see that COSA gets passed and the right pressure is put on it. So I actually have a lot of hope when I see this, because I don't think the Trump administration is somebody to roll over and play into the paw of big tech. I don't think they're like that. I don't think that's what I've seen them do. I think they go out and they operate on pure conviction. And I think if they would realize that there's millions of families that are waiting, there's countless nonprofit organizations that are looking right now, and so many groups that have worked so hard that are saying this is going to be the legacy literally of this administration if they pass a solid online safety legislation. Because the problem, I'm telling you, I've been telling people this, that in 2028, I believe that the next administration will get elected on the issues of AI and tech, because it's escalating so fast and so many people are going to get hurt, that will be the conversation that people are going to say that they're going to look for their future leader. So
a little construction, Jason.
Yeah. So,
no, joking. But I do want to say also, and again, we've pointed out this is all bipartisan, but I was very happy to see that our first lady participated with Senator Cruz with the Take It Down Act, which is about deep fakes, because I think anything that can bring attention and also a lot of media attention to these issues is a positive, is a win for everybody. So I'm hoping that really continues. But you know what, Jason, I had this thought when I saw during the inauguration. I'm like, oh, maybe these tech people are like, they see the writing on the wall and they're falling in line, so they'll be part of this administration on some level. I don't know if you're following this thought of mine that I'm having, because really we've got some stuff out there about sunsetting this Section 230, which basically says, 1996, that thing's got to be kicked to the curb, saying that these platforms are a newsstand. They're billboards. They can't be held responsible. If that is undone, there'll be a lot of leverage with everything. There's a lot of positive, great things happening, including Wired Human on the scene. How can the public help you?
Oh, appreciate it. Check out our website, get in contact with us, be a part of our events and what we're doing. I think that we're investing in youth and we're making them the centerpiece of all of these discussions. And I believe in the best in people. And I think most people in DC, we work with the Biden administration, we work with the Trump administration, and all across the board, that you find good people willing to make moves for children when you make them the centerpiece. So I would say if you're interested in helping us support that, making kids the center of all the discussions that we're having, bringing people together, healing the divide by making youth what we're all fighting for together, then get on board with Wired Human and be a part of this movement with us. We'd love to have you in this community and would love to hear from you. Thank you.
That sounded like a campaign speech, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
Our children, I always say this, are our future adults and leaders, and we have to give them the tools to make these informed and positive decisions and healthy decisions. And that, everybody, is wiredhuman.org. They're also on Facebook, Instagram. We are Wired Human. All the information, again, will be in the body of the video. I want to thank you, Jason. I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. To you and your wife, Lisa, you do workshops. You have curriculums. In this overwhelming world, the way you just put it out there is so easy to understand. I want everybody also, I'll have it again, in the body of the video, the free safety checklist. But I want to say to you, Jason, you and your wife Lisa and Wired Human are indeed digital warriors, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts here at the Warriors. I want you to promise me though, because the issues are changing so fast, that we will speak again soon.
Absolutely. I would love to, Lynn. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And I'm excited to continue to connect and fight together on this theme bipartisanly to really make this issue something that is dealt with within the next 2 to 3 years. I'd love to see this change happen and see families flourish together.
Thanks, Jason. Let's talk again soon.
All right. Thank you so much.